If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The following podcast may contain discussions supported by science that may be considered dangerous to some listeners and conspiracy theorists. Discretion is advised.
The Three Down Greencast is brought to you by Lucky Bastard Distillers, Saskatchewan's premier distillery, and by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, brewed in the heart of Regina.
Welcome to the Three Down Greencast. You are listening to the internet's only Acts of God podcast. I am Joel Gasson with John Fraser, as usual. As for the first time in a couple of years, we will actually get to discuss Saskatchewan Roughrider playoff football on this here program.
Wow.
This is the week. The West semifinal is upon us. The Riders will play the Lions this Saturday at Mosaic Stadium, as we learned over the weekend. So we will discuss that game and some of the things around it. We will discuss the big news that did come out on Saturday, which was the impending departure of the commissioner of the Canadian Football League, Randy Ambrosie.
Yeah.
And a whole lot more. Before we get into that, though, we have to, of course, discuss as why the Riders are playing at home this weekend and not next weekend. Or at least part of the reason why. There's always, yes, as we've discussed many times on this program, one play does not define a game. No. There's plenty of other reasons why the Montreal Alouettes did not beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Saturday afternoon, but nonetheless, because I can safely say that I have watched a lot of football in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you have watched a lot of football in your life.
Significant amounts, yep.
And I am sure most of our listeners have watched a significant amount of football at various levels and leagues in their life as well.
Yes.
Weather has often been a factor in football.
Yes. But unless you have a dome, of course.
Of course. Even then, sometimes like the Sky Dome leaked or things like that. But I can't ever remember seeing what I saw in Montreal on Saturday afternoon, which if for some reason you have not heard about it yet at this point, it was towards the end of the game. The Montreal Alouettes just went 2-out with about a minute left or so, I believe.
After Sergio Castillo had just missed a 62-yarder into the wind that would have put Winnipeg up.
Yes, which our colleague John Hodge was ready to roast Mike O'Shea for that decision to kick that field goal instead of keeping the offense on the field for at least another first down.
Yes, agreed.
But he got bailed out by what ended up being an act of God. I think it's really the only way to describe it, because out of nowhere, driving into the game, I heard discussions on TSN 690 because I was listening on Sirius XM where they play the home team broadcast on Canada Talks.
Yep.
And they were discussing, this was in the third quarter, that there was a little bit of a win. So, okay, a bit of a factor. But then I heard on the 3 Down Nation podcast before that, Big Gust, basically Sergio's first attempt, our guy Pueblo on scene in Montreal said there was absolutely no wind whatsoever.
Wild.
Which is not going to help his 62-yard kick attempt, by the way.
No, certainly. You need a little bit of a tailwind for that, just like he had on most of his big bombs. Sergio's
which you generally will get in an outdoor stadium.
100%.
One way or the other. In this case, there was apparently nothing. And then, just a couple of minutes later, just an absolute, basic plow wind blew through McGill Stadium just before Joseph Zemo was going to punt away the ball in an attempt to try to pin the Winnipeg Blue Bombers deeper into their own end. Instead, as Mike O'Shea talked about after the game, he believes that gust coming at that time caused the football to move on him a little bit, which led to the shank. Now, I'm certain even if he kicked it well, it wouldn't have gone much further. It may have been straighter, and they may have been able to get a little bit better field position out of it. But
it was the wildest thing I've ever
Zach Collaros described it on CJOB after the game as something out of the Wizard of Oz. And apparently he actually sang some song from it as well after too. That's how ridiculous this whole situation was. Is that Zach Collaros is making Wizard of Oz references and singing songs on the podcast on their post game show, because there are wild and wacky ways to win a football game, and then there is just the most random burst of wind that brings every Leaf within a 3-kilometer radius of McGill Stadium into the stadium at that exact moment in time.
So two stories. Story the first is the tale of how I ended up seeing that. Story the second will be how I think it's actually the Fraser curse. Okay, so I'm over at my father-in-law's, me and Tom Bohey watching the game together, and I see the kick, and I've got all 3 kids with me, and I see Serge's first kick come up short. I'm like, okay, well, that's it. So
he did miss one earlier in the game too.
Yes, but with the way the wind looked, with the way the game had been going, everything, like going for 62 without a tailwind, I think on the broadcast, Marshall or Dwayne said he was actually into, if there was any wind, it was in his face. So I'm like, okay, well, that's stupid. They should have went for it. I go, I go take a pee. I tell the kids to get all ready to go, and we're going back home. And as I come around the corner to see Don Bohey's TV, I don't even hear. I just see the leaves go everywhere, and I see the punt, and I just went, huh. So naturally, I see the punt go out of bounds, and I'm instantly doing the math, right? Years of play-by-play of football. You're like, okay, add 7 yards to this. I'm like, that's in his range. Like, instantly, I'm like, they're in Sergio range. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to put this back in Zach's hands. And then the rain starts coming down. I'm like, oh, God, like, don't tell me that it's going to slip or something. But no, my boy, good again. I texted him, my man. That's all I said. I was so shocked. I was blown away at the end of that game. So then I head out, and I had to stop at my mother-in-law was working the polls for the election. And I had to get her iPad set up. And I walk in, and we're in bomber gear, and everybody else working the polls is like, oh, yeah, we're playing for first tonight. I'm like, well, no, you're not. And I got to crush some souls, which made me happy. But second, I do thoroughly believe this is the Fraser cursed. Okay? So I was texting with some guys from the Stadneck, including Dave Stadneck, Joe, Vince Roulé, some other CFL fans. And after watching most of that game, I texted at 2:39 p.m., congrats on playing for first tonight, Sask fans. Dave Stadneck says, no, you do not come on the chat. I started a reverse Fraser curse the Riders, you bitch of a son. I said playing for first. Winnipeg ain't winning this game, no matter how fucking powerful the curse is, were my exact words. That was manipulation of the Fraser curse in the highest degree. Dave, I am sorry. That was the Fraser curse going, you don't think I'm that powerful, eh? We'll just watch this. Whoosh. And then it all works out for Winnipeg. So we hadn't really discussed a lot of Fraser cursing this year. I haven't really jinxed anybody that bad. And after a season laying dormant, the Fraser curse came back just to prove it still could. So Rider fans, I'm sorry. I just wanted an entertaining Saturday night football.
Didn't we all?
I wanted. That's all I was rooting for. Winnipeg didn't play good at all. As you mentioned, Sergio missed a couple. Brady couldn't get it going. Zach was mid. Like, just they look like a team resting guys for the playoffs, not a team that needed to win that game. So that's what I thought. And no, Fraser curse rears its head.
Yeah, it's just one of the stranger things I've ever seen. And I mean, it is what it is. And I mean, we'll get into it in a minute because it clearly sucked all the wind out of Mosaic Stadium as well. And they just decided that they were going to pack it in basically for the regular season. But
was it you or was it Nye that I saw that tweeted basically saying that gust of air you saw was the wind being sucked out of Mosaic Stadium?
That was like the lead on my Good, Bad, and the Dumb.
Oh well, then it
something like along those lines, anyway. Yeah, he may have tweeted it too. It's entirely possible.
Well, you know what's actually funny is it 100% was you, as on my dual monitors. Guess what I have open? The Good, the Bad, and the Dumb. So it was like as I'm saying that, I wonder who wrote that. Literally, your article with that as the opening line was in my eyesight.
Mm-hmm. And like it was funny. Like I got into the press box just as Sergio missed that 61-yarder.
Right.
And I texted you this, like this credit to the sound guy at Mosaic Stadium because they obviously had the game on the big screen.
Yep.
Played like the Price is Right loser horn when he missed that. It was like, bah, 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 bah. And then after that, they got the bye. The few fans that were there, they were just like, ugh. I mean, it was more explicit than that, but yeah, even the fans, I think, felt it in that moment, and it's just a wild moment that, yeah, feels like and it's the strangest thing is that it happened in Montreal of all places,
right?
Like the big gust of wind feels like a Winnipeg or Saskatchewan or Calgary kind of thing.
Well, 100%. It doesn't strike as much, which was great too. So as a reversal of the Price is Right loser music, one of my buddies, a Blue Bomber fan, my buddy Neely, sent me a still frame of Corey Mace with the Bombers celebrating in the background on the Maxtron with just simply the sound effect. Bum, bum, ba, bum, bum. He didn't even know that they'd played that in the stadium. I'm like, bro, check this out. So, yeah, it quickly, a little Fraser curse, little karma there, all mixed into one plow wind.
Absolutely. So because of that, the Riders will be playing in the West semifinal this Saturday afternoon against the British Columbia Lions. We will get into that and a whole lot more. But for the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, John, what is in the glass this week?
After lots of searching, high and low, up and down the shelves of the Sobeys liquor store closest to my house, I have found it. Canada's best beer. Pile of Bones and Nokomis's Cork, Strangeness, and Charm. It's good.
Yeah.
It is really good. Your description of like a Hoegaarden, but way better, is...
I think it's maybe a little more closer to like an Eardinger, but yeah, same idea.
Yeah, but a beer that most people have tried, or whatever that, not the 15, 16, I could see the bottle.
Oh,
yeah.
Cronenberg,
Yeah. Thank you. So like that, but obviously cleaner, better tasting, all that. Cracked it just before we started recording. So no, it's lives up to the billing of Canada's best beer if you're into that kind of thing.
For me, from our friends at the 9 Mile Legacy Brewing Company, I have a Hybrid Vigor, a nice amber ale. As a little chilly today, so it felt like drinking something not dark, but I don't have any dark beers right now either. But just something that felt good on kind of a chilly day.
That's fair. As we've discussed before, we are into darker beer whiskey season here, but here I am with a Cork and a double white IPA because
it's always summer somewhere, right?
That's fair. Maybe in the minds of Rider fans.
Maybe. The summer has officially come to an end as the CFL playoffs are here. The Riders will play the Bombers on Saturday. The Bombers maybe next week, but they will definitely be playing the BC Lions this Saturday at Mosaic Stadium. And we got to this game, of course, because as we're talking about the Bombers, they beat the Alouettes this week. And I think it was pretty obvious from basically the start of this game that I think maybe mostly because of the way that game ended.
Yeah.
That the Riders just pretty much packed it in and decided, let's just get out of here and move on to the next week. There wasn't much to take from that game. There wasn't much to talk about from that game. I think had the Bombers blown out the Alouettes, or had the Bombers played on Friday instead of, just right before the game, I think we might have seen a little more jump from the Riders a little bit, just because there was time to decompress from all of that a little bit. And like, football is an emotional game and you need to be in the right emotional space to play it. And they just weren't after what transpired, basically half an hour before they took the field.
No.
Which is why the game should have been played at the same time.
What?
But, yeah, no, whoever came up with that idea.
What a wild concept.
Yeah, who would have led to two great games on Saturday afternoon at the same time, coming down to a last-second field goal thanks to a giant gust of wind. But who would ever want to watch that back and forth drama?
No, clearly you'd much rather watch whatever that was on Saturday.
Yeah, so I think the only question that comes out of that game for the Saskatchewan Roughriders is, are you concerned at all after what you saw? And not necessarily from any specific sort of play or situation or anything, just the overall attitude. Because I heard a lot of the calls on the post-game shows, and there were people who were concerned now that they're, they took the week off, and it's not they're not setting good precedent, and they're getting into bad habits, and all this and the other thing ahead of the playoffs. The only point that I thought was fair that someone made was, it was a little unfair to the fans who did show up.
Yes.
Who did spend the hundreds of dollars to be there just for the team to pack it in. I understand being upset from that perspective, no question.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yep.
However, from a big picture football perspective, this is not a moment where I think, because they just, they didn't show up and let Jake Mayer throw for 500 yards against them, that they're suddenly in trouble this week in the West semifinal.
No, I agree with you. I think the number one priority is you made a really good point with the emotional level, right? You've got guys that are warming up, getting focused, getting dialed in, thinking that this could be a chance to clinch first, and all of a sudden guys are well into their pregame routines by the time that kick goes through.
Yeah.
And then to go to the guys and say, hey, Winnipeg won, we're sitting everybody we can, you're right. So now you have these guys that haven't played a lot this season that all of a sudden have to get ramped up, and the starters that aren't. The number one priority was coming out of this game healthy. And you could tell that neither team really wanted to get hurt. It's like both sides were playing, Calgary's players were auditioning a little bit, but if you watch that game back, and I don't know why you tore.
Yeah,
And mine was mostly in fast forward, but I found a couple things really interesting. The first was you could tell that nobody wanted to get hurt, both sides, right? A lot of these guys from Calgary might be looking at spring football jobs. They might be looking, make sure they're healthy heading into free agency, whatever next season. So you could tell just by the play, it looked very much like a Pro Bowl when the Pro Bowl still had hitting. You could tell nobody, there was no violent hits. There was a lot of pushes. There was a lot of wraps, things like that. And again, I don't watch a lot of games on my nice TV because I have 3 children, and you buy a nice TV and a surround sound system to watch sports on, and it's basically a Bluey delivery machine. So I did get the opportunity to watch a bit of this one on there when I was watching the replay, and I found it interesting that there seemed to be a lot of communication before guys were getting hit. A lot of defensive players kind of yep, I'm coming, hey, get ready kind of thing, which you don't see during normal games. So this leads me to the thought as to what can the league do and what can the teams do that in a situation like this where the game is utterly meaningless and you have 2 clubs just playing not to get hurt and putting just a dog shit product on the field for great reasons. I'm not suggesting that these teams should have turned it on. I'm not delusional. I don't believe in last week momentum. I believe in being healthy for the postseason. But I half jokingly said to you, do you allow both teams to settle in and play some flag football? Right? More logically, I'd like to see, let's face it, the CFL, even with resting the guys, the CFL has a very small roster.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a situation where maybe if in the last week of the regular season or once your playoff fate's been determined that there's no cap penalties for bringing guys up from your practice roster. Because I'm sure both these clubs would have loved to get a real-time look at a lot of guys they have on these practice rosters, but there's cap issues with doing that, moving guys up, down to the one game, so on and so forth. So maybe there's a solution there. I akin it to in the Canadian Junior Football League, you're allowed to dress a larger home roster than you are away. So there's a cap at, I believe, 45 players for the road to kind of make road games even for everybody. And I believe at home, the cap is 60 or 65 guys. So if somebody's blowing you out, you can put in basically guys that aren't going to travel, that aren't going to see the field, and get them some experience. And I don't know how you do that, but I would have liked to see, some of these guys in the practice roster that are playing for an addition for their football careers rather than a bunch of guys just, trying to gently tackle each other like it's the Pro Bowl and just because you're right. I did not pay to go to that game. There is no way as a fan I would have paid to go to that game the second Sergio's kick went through, but there's 20-some thousand people that did. And it's not fair to them that both these teams are in that position. And again, when you bought the tickets for that game, you thought this could be a first place showdown. Now, womp, 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 you're watching nothing. And it was a terrible nothing. And again, not criticizing the team, not criticizing the players, not criticizing the coaches. That's the nature of the beast when you have a, 72-week season and all your teams making the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something to consider, but it's also just kind of facts of life in football, I suppose. But yeah, overall, there's I wouldn't feel any concern about it. And it's interesting, too, because Rob Vanstone, the team's historian,
Yes.
did bring up an interesting tweet this week, just in case, because he obviously was hearing people talking about it as well.
Yes.
In 1989, the Saskatchewan Roughriders lost 47-19 to Edmonton in the regular season finale. They won the Grey Cup that year.
Okay.
In 1997, they lost 55-9 to Winnipeg in the regular season finale. They ended up winning the West title that year.
Okay.
In 2007, they lost 41-13 to Toronto in the West semifinal. Sorry, in the regular season finale.
Yes.
I just keep he calls it RSF in his tweet, so I keep getting see the SF.
You're thinking you're Ron Burgundying it a bit.
Yeah, though it's my fault, not the teleprompters. In the regular season finale, of course, in 2007, they won the Grey Cup. Not quite to the same degree as well, though. But in 2013, they lost their regular season finale to Edmonton 30-26, and they lost the week before to Calgary 29-25. Of course, they won the Grey Cup in 2013, starting with a West semifinal win over the BC Lions.
Like, the only time in recent memory, and I know I've cited this recently, that I can think of a team not needing to dress anybody is when the Giants tried to keep the New England Patriots from going undefeated. Ultimately lost, but that seems to be the only time that you've seen a team kind of dress guys in the regular season finale that already clinched and go on and win, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, losing the last game of the regular season basically proves that you were a good team that year, because it means you've made the playoffs. It means, you're playing perhaps the most violent sport in the world with some of the most, especially in those earlier days, like 2007, when you had the AstroTurf and all that kind of stuff. Like, you don't want to play your starters, right? Could the argument be made, could the argument been made that you were basically doing what Montreal did for the first half, putting your starters out there because you're not going to play a meaningful game for a couple weeks? Yeah, I could see that. But again, if you're losing the last regular season game, usually means you've done well. So again, it's nothing to be worried about. It was ugly, but we all knew it would be the second Sergio did Sergio things.
Yeah, and now that's not to say that there aren't concerns coming into this week's game against the BC Lions, but
certainly,
had the Riders won that game 84-0, those same concerns would still exist.
100%.
It's not about the way they played in that game. It's just more what the BC Lions are now, and we saw this a couple of weeks ago when they had their regular season finale against Montreal. They had, I think the exception to this rule is I think what we saw out of BC 2 weeks ago in their regular season finale.
Right.
They put VA out there, and I think they had to show something in order to, not only for like the outside world to believe that they could win this West semifinal, but probably even for themselves to believe that they could win this West semifinal.
Well, and I think too,
after the way the second half of their season has gone.
Right.
And the same thing applies to Ottawa a bit too this week. I think they started a lot of their guys because it's been a rough go for them, and they needed something positive to take out of that game. They ended up winning, but that didn't really matter at the end of the day.
No.
That they ended up beating Hamilton, but that was a little bit of a bonus. But you saw enough out of Ottawa now that going into that game against Toronto, you're like, okay, I still think Toronto's going to win, but this might be close now. So those are like the two sort of exceptions, and it's funny though,
if you will,
to that sort of general rule, right?
Well, and I find too, the BC Lions, it was almost like they were handing the reins back to VA.
Yeah. Well, you definitely got the sense that after the game, like JC Abbott did a great job talking and going around and talking to guys after the game. And to their credit, a lot of them were very open and honest about this, saying like, we love Nathan Rourke, but this is VA's team and we want to play for him. Was essentially what they said.
Certainly. And the only reason the BC's really struggled, I mean, their defense has mostly been the same, which has been okay, but it's when the second you took VA out of that lineup for Nathan Rourke, which long-term thinking, I
think it was the second VA didn't come back when he was healthy.
Yes.
At first you understood it. Like, okay,
yeah.
The first week, the week before, Jake Dolegala was dog shit. So yeah, you go to Nathan Rourke, even though he only had practiced like twice.
Right.
The week after that, you're in Victoria, even if VA is healthy. Okay, you let Nathan Rourke start in his hometown.
100%.
After that, though, it's okay, and they won that game big. But at that point, it's when you got to start to thinking, okay, when do we put VA back in here? And Rick Campbell just didn't do it until it didn't matter anymore.
No, exactly. And you could see it was almost like Nathan Rourke got worse as the season went on.
Yeah.
Right.
It was clearly weighing on him, too, that this thing is falling apart around him, and he feels probably at least partially responsible.
Well, certainly. And again, I'm never going to blame a guy that's been through like 17 different playbooks in the past year and hasn't played a meaningful game in almost 2 years, right? So I don't think he was put in a place to succeed. Now, BC looked like they were going to be one of the great failure stories of all time in terms of teams hosting a Grey Cup, right?
Yeah, no
they
question.
went out and they spent all the money and went and got all the guys, and it looked like, even from game 1 of the season, that this was going to be BC Montreal in the Grey Cup game at BC Place. And then all of a sudden, the Rourke things happens, VA gets hurt, and they look like a wounded dog, right? They were not themselves. They looked like frustrated. They looked lost. And then that win, they put VA back in and almost hand the reins back to him. That to me is what that team needed. And that to me is what is going to make this team dangerous now.
Yep. The question is going to become is which Vernon Adams are we going to see?
Right.
Because he's capable of both sides here. And he's capable of going out there for throwing for 6 touchdowns and 500 yards. He's also capable of throwing 6 interceptions.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fascinating all around in this game because both times these teams played, they weren't really with their guy, right? The Riders went into BC and they got thumped in a game that we both said was just a thorough thrashing in every sense of the word, but the defense kind of held them in it to some degree.
Yes.
But they were without Trevor Harris.
Right. And
the BC Lions come into Mosaic Stadium with Nathan Rourke, who is better than Shea Patterson, but not Nathan Rourke as he currently is.
Oh, no.
So they were without their actual quarterback this year in VA. So this will be the first time these two teams play this year with both of them at full strength on offense. And it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out.
It's funny, you can normally tell what a team is going to be after a full regular season.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I get it. There's ebbs and flows, and especially in the CFL, guys get added late. There's not a lot of trades, but there's a lot of signings healthy coming back. And I don't know what to think of this game because, again, even when Saskatchewan dominated BC, they were still missing a few guys, due to injury. Obviously missing Trevor Harris the first time when they lost to BC. Saskatchewan has not been healthier at any time this year than they are right now.
No,
and that includes the beginning of the regular season where Trevor Harris was still coming back from the leg injury. AJ Ouellette was obviously nicked by something, and it affected him all the way through the regular season. So this is basically the first meeting for these two clubs.
Yeah, because practice started today as we recorded this on Tuesday. Out of the guys that there's the long injury list here because they put the healthy scratch guys on there because they were technically on the one game the week before.
Right.
But of the guys that weren't on the one that weren't healthy scratches that are now full practicing this, at least on Tuesday, was Raquel Armstead, Adam O'Clair, Peter Godber, which was a huge one.
That's huge.
And Ryan Skeevier and Malik Straker. So, if we're talking about 2 offensive linemen and potentially now a really big 1-2 running back room if they suddenly put both Armstead and Ouellette on the field.
Oh, which I absolutely think they should do.
And you talk about getting out of that game healthy, only one guy on the injured list that did not practice this week was Joe Robustelli, who was only in there because it was the last game of the season. So I think they got out of it pretty good.
Yeah. And especially, too, the way, again, they started the season banged up. They've been banged up all year. Now you're finally healthy, and you're playing a BC team that's got their swagger back. This is normally you feel pretty confident that you know who's going to win a football game.
Yeah. Well, the odds aren't super confident right now because I believe the Riders are only 3.5 point favorites. And
which is basically
the home team gets a 3-point bump, right? So you're basically saying a half-point favorite for the Riders,
right? Even the odds makers, when Vegas doesn't know what to do, I mean that's the wild part too. Also, Robustelli wearing number 79 in that game. Yeah, he's that's a training camp number right there, just for poops and giggles. But I don't know what to make of it. Right?
This could be the game of the playoffs.
Oh, I think so.
I think this could be the best game of the playoffs. I think there's a very good chance the winner of this game goes into Winnipeg next week and wins.
which is what I said, that I honestly think that the Riders needed to play this West semifinal to keep the momentum going, because I think you've got a group here now that as much as we're talking about all the changes in BC, you've got a group here of Saskatchewan Roughriders players that haven't really been together that much this year. They're better off now with the Thunder and Lightning, or as the Detroit Lions are calling it, and I'm stealing it because I love it, Sonic and Knuckles approach to the backfield. Like, yeah, there's a really good chance that, barring somebody coming out with a major injury in this game, like the old classic Kevin Glenn handing off at the end of the 2007 East Final, unless you see a situation like that, yeah, I think whoever comes out of this almost has to be considered the favorite in Winnipeg.
So they won't be, like, in terms of odds. But,
no.
I think if you because you look at it both sides, I think obviously why the Riders would be speaks for itself, considering of meaningful games they would have then won like 5 in a row, and everything's been trending. Like, Trevor Harris has been the best quarterback in the league the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
If they actually get the run game going, the defense is, can make plays at any time. So there are very significant reasons as to why you believe the Saskatchewan Roughriders could beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I'm not saying they will, but they could.
Yes.
On the flip side, the general consensus, and I probably will still end up being true, is that the BC Lions aren't really the rugged outdoor Western team, so they will probably lose in Winnipeg. But if all of a sudden they have VA back and they won the last game of the regular season, they won this game, you're like, is this Team of Destiny vibes kind of thing going on, right?
Well, I think the Team of Destiny vibes might be to the Saskatchewan Roughriders team, right? Like, you had that awful middle of the season when you were entirely banged up, right? You managed to kick that Labor Day curse that hung over you for the last 2-3 years. And after watching Netflix has a new doc on my Boston Red Sox and the 2004 comeback, if you think these guys weren't hearing that, especially after watching this documentary, they've got like guys like Kevin Millar's like, oh yeah, we heard about it all the time. The curse, right? If you think that doesn't creep into somebody's head, you're wrong, right? So they've kind of exercised those demons, and then all of a sudden the team gets healthy at the end of the year, and they look strong. They look competent. They look, this playoff this year is wild, because I think
it feels like literally anything can happen.
Oh yeah,
the only thing the only one I'm like, even I would still not be shocked if it happened. The only one I would say at this point is I don't think the Ottawa Red Blacks will make the Grey Cup, but if they did, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense.
But see, you're right, and I agree with you. Because I think you look out east. Toronto's not playing their best football, so Ottawa can beat Toronto, and then
they were probably the best team in the league until they just didn't care in Edmonton for the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were in the same boat. So whatever.
Meanwhile, Montreal hasn't played a meaningful football game since
2 weeks after Labor Day.
Right? Like Montreal has not had to turn it on at all. And the fact that when their starters weren't against Winnipeg, and the Winnipeg D was very good in that game, the Winnipeg O couldn't get anything going. And the fact that Montreal starters were struggling so badly, and now you've got another bye week to sit, it's the classic case of having, rest over rust. Like, this team is just
I think Toronto goes in there and beats them probably pretty easily in terms of a reversal of last year. I don't know if Ottawa will be quite as easy, but I could see it happening, yes.
No, certainly. And the other thing, too, to BC is normally you're thinking this time of year and you're thinking, it's going to be cold and windy and rainy and every hit's going to hurt that much more, which is not something you want against, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. 14-day forecast has it in the double digits for Winnipeg. So the BC Lions can thank climate change on that one as well. That
currently now they're saying 9 on Saturday here.
Right.
So that's pretty good.
Right, like, you're not looking at your classic, finesse dome team goes out in the playoffs and plays like shit because it's cold. It's not that cold, especially if the sun's out and you're in, this isn't a year like the Winnipeg snowstorm when when Vernon Adams threw 5 picks and Zach threw 6 or something. It's funny. Okay, and now they're going to win the Grey Cup, because I'm going to say this. I think the team I would ranking them 1 to 6. I think Montreal right now would be my 6.
I don't know if I'd go with that though, but they're not in my top 3 right now for sure.
No, I don't think they are. I might have Ottawa ahead of them. But again, now Montreal's going to win the Grey Cup, so go put all your money on that. Just always inverse my picks.
The one thing we do know for sure that is going to be happening is that this will be Commissioner Randy Ambrosie's final Grey Cup.
Yes.
As he announced during the halftime, after it was reported by Sportsnet's Rashid Madani, that he will be, quote, retiring, unquote. He actually didn't have the votes at the Board of Governors to continue on because his contract essentially is voted upon every year or so to see if he should continue on. And he basically said, no, I retire. You can't fire me. And so...
the ultimate power move.
Yeah, which in this situation, because I'm sure the way his contract is, getting fired probably doesn't come with a severance. My labor advice to you is if you're ever in a situation to get fired, please get fired and let them pay you to go away.
Yes, 100%.
That is always my advice to people in those situations. However, it's an interesting one because on one hand, I think it's been a bit of an underwhelming thing, a bit of an underwhelming era for the Randy Ambrosie era. But, we look back at it hasn't been as bad, I think, as... kind of in the moments at times we thought about. Like, the lows were really low. Like, when he went to the government groveling for money and was completely unprepared, that was bad. I think he is the master of overselling and hyperbole, and I cannot stand his overpositivity about everything all the time and how everything is 150%. Like, tell us the dang truth, for God's sakes.
Yes.
But
like even Mark Cohan, who was so positive and so outgoing and everything, told us the truth when you asked him a question.
Yeah, like there are times where it's like, no, you have to be realistic about what's happening around you. So, I mean, that's sort of the gripes, some of the big gripes that I've had with the guy over the years, and obviously the Genius Sports thing and the global thing, which was, again, more of an oversell thing than an actual, execution thing.
But everybody's got a backup kicker now.
Well, most of the punters in the league are all there now.
That's fair.
So, I mean, there's all that, but, I mean, it's hard to argue as well, though, that since he's taken over, there is not a actual bad ownership situation in the league either.
No, and that's
like the big pillar of what he accomplished is okay. For the first time, really, maybe ever, at least in a very long time, you could say that at least financially, we can argue about whether every team is spending as much as they should, but at least we can argue that all 9 teams are financially stable and sound, and there is no threat of anything happening to any of them anytime soon.
Which is funny because that's what he kept. Did you watch the interview with him and Dave Naylor?
I saw the 1 minute blip on CTV, but I didn't watch the whole thing online. No.
Yeah, no, I haven't watched the whole thing online either. But it's almost like his "F you, I'm right. This is why I'm quitting" moment is 100%. He and that is a fair hill to die on. Like if 100%. You want to come out and say like
a lot of very good commissioners haven't been able to accomplish that.
I would argue. Look at the National Lacrosse League right now.
I'm talking just in the CFL specifically, but yeah.
Right. But I mean, if you expand it out to all pro sports, you look at MLS teams that are collapsing. Us in the National Lacrosse League, even though having good leadership now in head office, just lost Panther City 3 days before free agency was set to begin. Right. That kind of chaos doesn't look good in the league, and that is not there. Yes, should Randy have maybe not pushed Halifax so much?
Yeah,
probably.
Maybe not. That's such a weird situation because I think in retrospect you wouldn't like to, but I think the pandemic really put a big damper on a lot of what was going on there.
Yep.
Like had there not been the pandemic, which is true for just about every aspect of life right now,
yes.
I think things might have turned out a little differently in Halifax, but we'll never know, right?
No, certainly. And the fact that the Sickos committee still do a better job of promoting the CFL on social media than the CFL does, right? I don't know how directly that falls under Randy, how directly that falls under the Board of Governors, the teams. Like, again, in-person attendance was up, albeit a meager 1% this year.
Yeah, like things are generally stable on that front. Things are generally stable on the TV side. Like, there have been commissioners that have left this league in far worse shape than he has.
Oh, certainly.
And I mean, and the question becomes, where do they go? And also, in fairness to him, like every other commissioner before him, he is merely just a figurehead for the Board of Governors.
Oh, certainly.
And we know in this league especially, there are 2 or 3 of them that are really in charge of this league.
No, certainly. And I think more so now than ever that you have real money behind the league now. right? You have like the Calgary Sports Entertainment Group is basically a license to print money, right? They've got
they're sort of the one I was referencing at where they're financially sound, so nothing's going to happen to the Stampeders, but are they putting as much into it as they should? But at least we don't have to worry about the Calgary Stampeders going under because the money is going to be there.
Right.
Same with the Argos. I think it's generally stabilized. Yes, we'd still like attendance to be higher, but there isn't really.
The TV numbers are strong.
The TV numbers are strong. Attendance is slowly, gradually improving there. And it's not really a conversation. We've all just kind of accepted that this 14-15 is a decent enough number for them.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't feel like all of a sudden, like, there isn't this crisis around the Argos anymore. There obviously isn't. There never really was a crisis around the Alouettes, but they're stabilized now. And obviously in BC too. Time will tell on Larry Thompson, but at this point, it seems fine. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like there is no warning lights. You don't have to put a telethon on for any of these teams right now to keep them viable. And you need stability before you can do anything else. And I think the league now, which is funny, Ambrosie's going to leave it, and probably one of his biggest failures that people are going to cite is this inability to expand to Halifax or Quebec City or wherever. Right.
Yeah.
And don't sell me that BS that Peterson's slinging that they want to put a team in Saskatoon. Like, come on. Like there's no way that works out. I live in Saskatoon. I'll tell you that for free right now. Like that, or if you did, they would become like the Las Vegas Raiders or the LA Rams, where everybody is wearing the opposition's jersey anyways. Like it's a terrible idea. We don't have the facility. It's dumb. That's a whole other side. So if Ambrosie's only knocks are expansion and marketing and stuff, but how can you market if you don't have stability? How can you expand if you don't have stability? And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, yeah, it is kind of a shame that he is being pushed out because
like it's probably about time. Like, I mean, this is not a long-term job. This is not a job where people generally do this for like 10, 20 years or for far too long. Because I think it's important in all leagues that these guys turn over more than they do, quite frankly.
Right.
And I think, at the end of the day, like it hasn't been a perfect tenure for Randy Ambrosie, but I do think when we look back at it, we'll be like, yeah, in the moment it felt kind of weird, but it really wasn't that bad.
No, I absolutely agree. And when you peel back the curtain, and again, the clip they played on CTV, and I'm sure he was coached or whatever to say, hey, we have better owners than ever before. That to me, as a guy that's worked behind the scenes in professional sports, that can often be the hardest thing to do. And he was able to do it.
And it's the most important aspect of the entire sport. So
100%. There's money and ownership. And now, the new guy, this is almost like, I
mean, you're basically at this point, if you're the next commissioner of the league, you're taking over, a team that, it's been built pretty well by the GM, and you just need to put some finishing touches to put it over the finish line.
You are basically
you're the 2007 Saskatchewan Roughriders. You're Roy Shivers. And Randy Ambrosie is Roy Shivers, pretty much.
I was just about to say that, and you beat me to it.
Yeah, like there were flaws on that Rough Rider team, both on and off the field, but if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't. The whole 2007 to 13 era wouldn't have happened. So
no, and you're bang on. They laid all the groundwork for that, and other guys took the credit, right? As I imagine, the next guy will take the credit for the success the CFL is poised to have in the next 5 to 10 years, however long they hold the job for.